Now, during the height of the pandemic, as well as high unemployment, which is starting to go down, a lot of people were facing evictions due to loss of income, and still are today, by the way. And now, at the time, of course, companies were closing down. People couldn't work. They couldn't file childcare because of different factors, closed schools. They got sick with COVID, or they couldn't afford to rent, or things like that. Now, in response, there were cities and the government that signed some moratoriums on evictions. Not to mention, of course, they increased benefits for unemployed people, as well as sent a few stimulus payments. Now, of course, as I've noted many, many times, the actions that we took in America were not enough. What we should have done is sent people $2,000 a month in a basic income for the duration of the crisis. It is unconscionable that we are the only country, we are the only modern advanced industrial country that did not give people monthly amounts of money. Okay. We're the only one. But of course, we're pretty unique in how savage we are to our own people. And one of the reasons is people like Charles Koch, the other Koch brother. Now, David, of course, had died within the past few years. I don't quite remember when, but I don't really care too much because, he's dead. Great. Not going to dance on his grave, but like, I don't really care. I'm kind of glad he's gone. But his brother, still here, and he's up to some nefarious things. In fact, he tried to eliminate eviction moratoriums by donating to these organizations, the shadow organizations under the umbrella, essentially, which lobby Congress to try to eliminate protections for people who are renters. So now, not only that, but also taking advantage of, housing, bought up a lot of real estate and turned them into rental properties. And so, as the Daily Poster explains, in the last few months, the Texas Policy Foundation, the Pacific Legal Foundation, and the aptly named, for its Orwellian name, the New Civil Rights Alliance, have been pushing federal courts to strike down the Center for Disease Control and Prevention eviction moratorium, which is designed to protect millions of Americans from being thrown out of their homes during a pandemic. Now, the group, or groups, together have actually won quite a few cases, 2 rulings so far. Between 2017 and 2019, the Charles Koch Foundation contributed about $7.7 million to those 3 conservative organizations, according to the founders' tax returns reviewed by the Daily Poster. $4.6 million went to the Texas Policy Foundation, $2 million to the New Civil Rights Alliance, and $1.1 million to the Pacific Legal Foundation. Now, the Koch Networks and Brother Group, called Stand Together Trust, separately donated $500,000 to the Texas Public Policy Foundation in 2019. So again, look at that name. All right. The New Civil Rights Alliance. Do you know how many people were hit hardest by COVID-19? The job losses, the deaths, the poverty. It was the Black community. The Black and Latino community were hit hardest, which is why, of course, Republicans, a lot of conservatives were like, we don't care. Open up the economy, kill grandma. Not a big deal. Don't wear your mask. That's what they said. All right. And so not only that, but the black community is at the biggest risk for losing their homes. And yet this organization wants to call themselves the New Civil Rights Alliance while simultaneously pushing to end the eviction moratorium. Disgusting. Whose civil rights were they looking out for? Apparently, they were looking out for the rights of landlords to kick poor people out during a pandemic. And before you say, well, yeah, poor landlords, being a landlord's not a real job, for one. And for two, you know that, you might not know, but a lot of housing is, especially rentals, are run by giant corporations now, big companies. And secondly, to help people who do rent out, because there might be somebody like running a B&B or something like that, or Airbnb, that, is not a big corporation. You know what would have helped them? A moratorium on their mortgage. Now, of course, they didn't do that. Instead, what they lobbied for is to basically eliminate the eviction moratorium so you can throw people out during a pandemic. And by the way, Koch doesn't care about anyone but himself or his money. And since, of course, the pandemic started, he had been shoveling more money into real estate, buying low so that he can convert all these things into rentals, drive the prices out for housing, drive it up, and force more people into renting at higher prices than you would actually for a mortgage. I mean, it really is an insidious plan. In fact, in March of this year, the Wall Street Journal published a report headlined "Charles Koch is betting big on distressed real estate." The paper reported that the billionaire corporate conglomerate is emerging as a major real estate investor during the pandemic, using its robust cash reserves to buy properties at beaten down prices and betting on a longer term recovery. Last April, a month into the pandemic, the Koch real estate investments made a $200 million preferred equity investment in Amherst Holdings LLC, single family rental business, according to the corporate law firm Jones Day, which said it advised the Koch Industries subsidiary on the deal. Amherst says that in 2012, its affiliated funds have acquired and operated more than 30,000 homes, all rentals. Starting last May, the Koch real estate investments also began a financial relationship with Ladder Capital Corporation, culminating in a $32 million equity investment in December. Ladder finances residential real estate, and the Wall Street Journal recently reported that its subsidiaries' loans to former President Trump have been scrutinized by prosecutors. Koch Real Estate Investments was also among the group of investors that last month bought ownership stake in SmartRent, a landlord technology company. So you have all of these companies that are being bought up by Koch Industries. Amherst owns Main Street Renewal, which operates a total of 20,000 homes, according to Fortune magazine. Main Street Renewal's website lists home rental locations in 17 states, including Ohio, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, and Florida, all over the country. And so these are big corporations that own a lot of homes and have turned basically what would have been homeowners into lifelong renters. And of course, they snap up these homes and reduce supply, drive up prices, turn them into rentals, which of course, in a lot of cases, actually cost more than a mortgage and everything, combined into it. And they will forever continue to generate revenue. And of course, you create a so-called housing shortage or housing crisis. But it's not about the lack of homes that are being built. And that's the thing that always gets, referred to. Oh, we need to build more houses, No. You actually have to allow regular people to purchase houses and not these giant conglomerations to turn them into rentals or even foreign investors. And that's, again, the problem. But not only that, Ladder and Amherst, and by extension Koch Industries, also would benefit if they're successful in overturning those eviction bans. So again, you're forcing people to be renters, and when an emergency hits, well, if you don't pay the rent, you get kicked out. Now, as a homeowner, you actually get a lot longer of a grace period and a lot more options, as well as federal help in order to, make sure that you don't end up having to foreclose on your house. When you're a renter and you miss the rent, you have a very, very small grace period and can get kicked out immediately. And so there are benefits to home ownership that are incredible, especially if you're having a hard time, if you're having a difficult time, not so much for renters. And so that's another problem as well. And again, as I mentioned, they have had some wins on the front for being able to overturn some of these moratoriums. Both Ladder and, in February, the Texas Public Policy Foundation had convinced a federal judge in Texas to declare the CDC's eviction moratorium unconstitutional. Now, of course, that is Texas. In March, a federal judge in Ohio then sided with the Pacific Legal Foundation, ruling the CDC exceeded the scope of its authority with its eviction ban. Now, the whole point, though, of an eviction moratorium is so that people can shelter in place. So that's important. If you don't have a place to shelter during a pandemic, then you're at risk of contracting the disease or the virus and also spreading the virus. So being able to shelter at home and stay home was an incredibly important part of trying to control the spread. So I think it is part of the CDC's mandate because they are all about, supposed to be, public health. That was their mandate. Now, what's really gross about this too is that these companies had already known that the pandemic itself was going to be really horrible for renters, and they didn't care anyway. They continued to try to crush moratoriums. In fact, in March of last year, Amherst Capital researchers had warned investors the pandemic could disproportionately crush renters. Quote, while no economic class will be untouched by COVID-19's silent wrath, lower middle-income household, mostly hourly workers, are likely to bear the brunt. A disproportionate share of these affected hourly wage workers are renters who will need payment support in these trying times. So now, payment support. What do we get from Republicans? Every effort to try to stop any kind of payment supports that would help renters, that would help the American people. In fact, Koch-funded politicians continued to try to stop any sort of help for regular hourly wage workers. Okay? And so not only that, but they also tried to give most of the relief money, to the large corporations and the rich, while fighting against the eviction moratoriums. Amherst reported lobbying Congress on issues related to the single-family residential housing market, according to the most recent federal disclosures from the first quarter of 2021. In filings with the Security and Exchange Commission, Ladder recently warned investors that lenders and landlords face challenges in enforcing contracts and instituting proceedings such as foreclosures and evictions as a result of moratoriums, and that therefore new properties that we may acquire or redevelop may not produce significant revenue immediately. And of course, they're worried, obviously, about one thing: revenue. And in October, days after the Pacific Legal Foundation and the Texas Public Policy Foundation filed their lawsuits, Ladder CEO Brian Harris used an earnings call to declare that these eviction moratoriums that are out there are accidents waiting to happen. Quote, the government at large takes people who are voting and says, you don't have to pay your rent this month, but they're not going to be there when they owe 6 months worth of rent. And they haven't told the landlord that he doesn't have to make his payment to his lender like me. You want to know how much the banks got during the pandemic? Over $6 trillion in liquidity. You know how much corporations got? Billions of dollars in paycheck protection loans. While the American people, some of the American people, not even all of them, got a total of $3,200 over the course of an entire year per person. These stimulus checks were heavily means tested. A lot of Americans didn't get them, who might have needed them because it was based on the previous year's taxes. Not only that, despite the moratorium, which basically says you don't have to pay rent. Okay, but that doesn't mean that rent doesn't accrue. And so now out there, if you've had 6 months where you couldn't be able to afford the rent, or you had to basically, say, look, I only have enough for groceries, I only have enough to keep the lights on, food and all that stuff, since I can't find work, or I can't work due to this, or I'm sick, or I have medical bills, anything like that, or what I'm getting just isn't enough, that money still piles up. That money still piles up, and it doesn't go away. And so, as a result, you have millions of people out there who now have thousands of dollars in back rent. And to show you how bad it is, compared to what we actually got from the government, the average rent for a person in America is about $1,100 for a 2-person apartment. a 2-bedroom apartment. A studio apartment is over $900. And that's not just in the cities, where studio apartments can range to $2,000 a month. In fact, in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment in California, for example, a renter needed to earn an average hourly wage of nearly $37 an hour. And by the way, that does make me rage, because the rent is too damn high. Too damn high. In fact, rental costs were considerably higher than the hourly minimum wage in all U.S. states. And what the Kochs are doing, along with these groups, along with foreign investors, are driving up the price of rent and driving up the price of property, turning them again into rentals and fighting against ways to protect renters. And so what you're going to end up with is nobody being able to afford these places. Their other advocacy on keeping wages low too, you have to wonder if they actually realize that nobody's going to be able to live in those places and in places where the jobs exist. Of course, that does mean one thing. It means that, well, I mean, if you can't afford to live in the place where you're working, I guess you're just going to have to commute, which means more travel and, yes, more usage of fossil fuels. And we all know where the Koch family got their fortune from: fossil fuels. As always, with everything, follow the money. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.